Welcome back, everybody, to Photography Tips and Tricks, your show for gear, tips, inspiration, anything you need to take your photography over to the next level. My name's RC, and I've got a ton of different new things that I want to talk to you about. We have Razor Blade Pro. We won't really talk about that right now. I'm just excited that it's here. So we have this. We have some Adobe updates that have happened, right? So we have the Creative Cloud updates. We have some new bags from Think Tank, and we have the Fuji X-T1's new 18 and 135 lens. So there's a lot of new things to be able to cover. Why don't we start first and foremost with this? So if you've watched a couple of episodes, you've noticed that I've been shooting a lot with this Fuji X-T1. And there's a couple of interesting things about it, right? One of the things that I've enjoyed about the camera is that aside from being 16 megapixels and APS-C and all of that stuff, it's something that has 80 points of weather seals. So when you're working with weather-sealed cameras, you're not necessarily saying that they're waterproof, you're saying more that they're weather-resistant. So they're resistant to dust, they're resistant to rain, they're resistant to elements. So this camera is supposed to be water-resistant, dust-resistant, and freeze-proof to about -10 Celsius. Now that's really good. However, the consideration that you needed to keep in mind was that the lens itself was not weather resistant. That's until now. They have an 18 to 135 weather resistant lens, and it's a 3.5 to 5.6, which you wouldn't necessarily think that it's that fast of a lens, but what you're really getting here is weather resistance, and I think that that's the key point with this. So Fuji was nice enough to let me shoot with it for a couple of weeks and kind of play with it and, you know, kick it around and take a look at the images and see what I came up with. Now, the thing that I thought was kind of cool is that really this thing, I took it out and I gave it some really kind of good sprays. You know, in Florida, we do spend a lot of time just kind of getting some regular misting that happens in here, right? And for that, it did pretty good, right? Like it's still on, right? We can still kind of see it. We can see, take some pictures. It's a little, you know, fuzzy here, but it's on, right? It definitely totally works. But, you know, you went out there, and if you were in Florida, I mean, you're really, really, really getting rained on when you're there. I mean, it really does take a lot of work. Hold up a second. There are times in Florida, in the middle of the afternoon, where it doesn't really come down like that. It really actually more comes down like this, right? So it'll just kind of get a lot of this kind of stuff right in there. Oh, it's getting on my computer. I gotta be careful with that. Let's move this out of the way there and just kind of proceed over here with a little bit of splashing. Yeah, that's probably, that's pretty good right there. So suffice it to say, it actually can take a pretty good water beating, right? So this is doing okay so far here. Let me just go ahead and give you this real quick and kind of dry my hands over here. And that's basically what happened when I went out with this camera. We wanted to shoot a bunch of different types of scenarios. And I'll show you some of the scenarios here. Let me just go ahead and dry my hands because the touchscreen will not work like this. So what I'm gonna do is I'll come back over here. We'll start with this one. So this was the first image that we got when we were working with this camera, right? So the first image we shot was this soldier inside of, it was like Lakeland, this preserve area that we have here in Lakeland. So we had that, and basically, I mean, the shot was nighttime shot in the middle of the rain. You have a lot of detail in this one section. This was another one, right? So this is what I do on weekends, right? A lot of the times I just like to take my shirt off and just kind of hang out in front of walls. It's just kind of what I do. But I figured I'd let somebody else try that instead. And I had him kind of stand there, and we wanted to kind of get some misting and some spraying with the camera. Did totally well, right? We went out, and we know that a lot of people aren't pro photographers. There's photographers that are gonna just take pictures of their kids. So I took my friend Jen's son, and we went out, and we tried to do some pictures with some rain. We also got him seriously, seriously drenched. We did the same thing to my daughter, right? So she worked out, she went out there, she did pretty well, right? What I liked about it was the fact that we could really get in there and do some cool artistic shots with most of this. So it's worked inside of a portraiture standpoint. It's worked inside of a high contrast, a little bit of water. It's worked in an environment where it's seriously getting covered. From there, we took it to a spot where we knew it was going to get drenched. So we actually got a model And we put them out here right before the rainstorm, and it started coming down. That's why I wasn't really all that worried about it when I was kind of spraying this water in here. This thing took a huge, huge downpour. It really handled itself very, very well, and I was able to get out there and make some really nice images with this. So one of the other things that I thought was really good is that when you're using a lens like this, you're not necessarily gonna just be doing it for storms, right? I wouldn't just buy a storm lens. I would wanna use that same lens in a bunch of different environments, right? What if it's not raining? How well does it do? And as it turns out, it does extremely well. So this is a picture that I did when it wasn't raining, right? And we chased rain. I chased rain for like the better part of 12 days. And this was one of the pictures that I did. Right before we took the picture of the water wall, I did a picture of my wife, just some window light. And this is a picture of my daughter with just window light. Now, the beautiful part about this is that these are just JPEGs. So this was JPEG out of the camera. I was taking a look at this, and I'm like, this picture here and the other picture here, these two were just JPEG shots, and I was just absolutely floored. I love the image quality. I love the sharpness. I love the performance of the camera. The camera did extremely well in those environments, and you probably can't see it, but it is on. It's still going. It's still shooting. This is probably something that they wouldn't do, but I've been spending some time just kind of getting it seriously drenched, and I've been very, very happy with the results. So that was one of the things that I want to report to you. If you want to see more about that stuff, just go take a look at my blog at aboutrc.com, or we can go ahead over here and just go to the Fujifilm USA site under the product section. Click on the products, go to the digital cameras, and one of the first things that you'll see here is the X-T1, and you'll read releases on the new lens. So that'll get you up to speed for that. Now, that's the new lens that just came out from Fuji. We've got some other stuff. We've got Creative Cloud updates and some stuff from Think Tank coming up when we come back. Welcome back, everybody. Photography tips and tricks, RC here. Now, I want to talk to you about some viewer mail. Last season, we talked a little bit about modifiers, and we talked about different types of modifiers and how to be able to use them. But one of the ones that we didn't really consider was the beauty dish. So a comment that usually comes back is, beauty dish, softbox. Which one would you use? So I figured we'd take Corey, one of the Photoshop guys, we'd take him to the studio and actually work with this. So here's the straight dope. A beauty dish, it's just a giant round reflector that has a reflecting part in the center of it, right? So light goes in through the center of it, kicks off of this one plate, and spins around this entire dish. It's really used for kind of hard defining edges. And in portraits of, let's say, women, right? Fashion, modeling, things like that, it really does define cheekbones, but it's considered to be a hard-ish kind of light, not necessarily something as much of a reflector pan, but soft yet very definable. So this is the beauty dish, right? Generally, you want to keep it, I don't know, maybe 2-3 feet away from the subject. So in this case, I just have a black V flat sitting there. We have a light that sits right here in this one section that's kind of serving as a hair light. And then that hair light is just going to kick into the back of Corey's head, off camera right. So when you take a look at this picture, this is pretty much what you get, right? Even lighting, it's okay. It's not extremely sharp, right? It's not extremely like really gritty, but it definitely is very definable. So when you're looking for something that kind of defines facial features, that's something that's really good. By comparison, oh, I did want to talk about this. See, that's on the right-hand side right here of his head. When you're looking right there, that one section on his right ear, you want to be able to control that spill from this one environment right here. So you have that light that's hitting him there, and you'll see that that flash that we have on the right-hand side is open. It's going to spill everywhere. That's going to cause something that looks like this. What I did for that is I countered by putting a grid spot. So think of a grid spot as being like a little grid that you put inside of a pan, And what it does, it's almost kind of like shining a light through a whole bunch of straws. It takes all of the light and it focuses it down to one really, really, really small spot. So rather than having the light spill onto his cheekbone, you can have it really controlled into one specific area. So now you combine that with the beauty dish, and that's what you got there. So really controlled light on one side, beauty dish hits it, it's a nice portrait. So what about the softbox, right? So we'll take a look at a softbox here, and in this environment, we have the softbox at generally the same position. Corey's really happy to be doing this. And the results of this, it's a softer kind of light. Now that could be a good thing. You could want that, but you could not want that. This is all pretty much based on style. But if you were to see them side to side, you can see that one of them is a little edgier. It's a little sharper. It has a little bit more attitude. When it's shot in a high key environment, white background, light colored, you can really get some good definition and some really nice tones with that. The softbox, by comparison, tends to be very buttery, very, very smooth, which is good in certain situations. So it's not that you would prefer one versus another. You obviously have to model it towards your own shooting styles and see which one is going to work best for you. So I figured we'd go ahead and answer that while we were at it. Now, a couple of other things that I wanted to talk to you about were the Creative Cloud updates. If you didn't know, right, just yesterday, Adobe released the new version of the Creative Cloud. Now, I'll pull up here a website, and it kind of corresponds to why I have the razor here as well. This is something else that we've been working on, but I wanted to bring this up. If you want to follow along, just go right to the Adobe website, and at the Adobe website, there's a blog post that talks about the 2014 release of the Creative Cloud, and you can read the blog post there. They've done new blurs, you've got smart blurs, they've gotten rid of a couple of different things, which I wasn't a big fan of. But they've done a lot of housekeeping, not just in Photoshop, but in Photoshop and Lightroom. They've added stuff for the iPhone. So there's a lot of features that are there. We can go ahead and explore all of those things by just going right through the Adobe website, and you can see all of the different updates inside of this blog post. Now, a couple of the different things that I thought were really good to stand out is that they took their photography program, right, their Photoshop and Lightroom bundle that was $10 a month. That for the longest time was $10 a month. They kept saying, all right, limited time, limited time, limited time. Overwhelming support said, keep it there. So they've done that. I think that that's a positive thing. One of the other things that was positive is that they've added, for me, they've added high DPI support inside of Windows. Let me explain what happens here. I'm using the Razor Blade, the new Razor Blade. It has a QHD display. So this puppy is IGZO, and it's 3200 by 1800. So it is 4 times the average display of the old Razor Blade, and it's around 262. So we're talking super, super, super sharp in a 14-inch touchscreen display. Awesome, really cool. We'll talk about that later. But I wanted to use this for the longest time, and I couldn't because this is what happened. You would go inside of here, inside of Photoshop, and you would go, let's say, start Photoshop. Because it was such a high resolution display, 3200 by 1800, this is what it looked like. You see the file menu all the way up there? You can barely see it. That sucked, right? So they needed to update all of that stuff. And it's something that people are using as they're using higher and higher, higher DPI displays. That needed to change. This brings me to one big caveat that you need to understand. When you install the updates for the Creative Cloud, I'm gonna go over here. Inside of here, you're going to see the apps, and you'll see that as you see that, you'll see the apps here. You'll see Photoshop CC and Photoshop CC 2014. The updates this time around are 2 separate apps. It's not like you're going to fire it up and it's going to say, oh, let me update your existing version of Photoshop. That's not the case. It is going to install 2 versions of Photoshop, Photoshop CC and Photoshop CC 2014. That means that when you update all of this stuff, you're gonna have 2 copies of that program sitting on your computer. You're gonna have to uninstall one of them. And this is Mac or PC. Both of them are gonna have the same problem. So that's the reason I can turn around and do this. You'll see here, I have Photoshop CC, and then to the right of it, I have Photoshop CC 2014. When I click on that one, the new release, you'll see that the splash screen looks very different, and this is a lot easier for you to be able to manage. It looks a lot cleaner, it looks a lot nicer. The support is under the experimental features inside of the preferences file. So you can change that to be able to magnify the support for high DPI count. So there's a lot of information that you can follow for most of this stuff. Check out the Adobe website, but I also want you to check out our Creative Cloud Resource Center. So go to kelby1.com/cc-resources-live. So I'm going to highlight that. We'll go ahead and put that here for you. I'll give you a second to write that down. kelby1.com/cc-resources/live. So let's get and take a look at the Resource Center. There's information here about every application. Now, it's not just Photoshop. Keep that in mind. You have story and design. I mean, there's a bunch of information right here, right available to you for free, and it's all available over at Kelby One. Now, a couple of other things. If you want to know more about the laptop, and obviously send us an email. If you want to see more about it, happy to talk about it, but you can find all of this information over at razorzone.com. We're looking at the Razer Blade Ultra Thin gaming laptop. Seeing is believing. I'm absolutely loving it. Now, we have a contest. So what I want you to do is before we do the contest, let me do this. Stacy Pearsall. Right? And I want to be able to talk about her because she was just here recently and she was doing an interview series. All right, Mia McCormick, our own Mia McCormick, is doing an interview series called Trailblazers. And Stacy Pearsall is a person who epitomizes being a trailblazer. So she's going to be the website for you to watch this week, as well as the prize for this week. So a phenomenal book, thanks to the folks at Peachbit. We have a photojournalist field guide, right? In the trenches with combat photographer Stacy Pearsall. So make sure that you take a look at this over at Peachbit, but one of you guys is going to win this book. How do you do it? This is what I want you to do. I want you to go to the Kelby One website. At the Kelby One website, I want you to go over to the webcast section. In the webcast section, I want you to find photography tips and tricks. We have other shows that you should take a look at. But for now, let's go to photography tips and tricks. This is going to show that it's episode 63. Look for episode 64. Make sure you go to 64. Click on 64. Then from here, go all the way down to the bottom of this section. Sign in to leave a comment. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. Tell us what you want to see. Leave us a comment in that one section. If you're watching on YouTube, Google+, Hulu, wherever it is that you're watching, you have to come back to this site over here, and on episode 64, leave us a comment. One of you guys is going to win the Photojournalist Field Guide. Now, last thing that I want to leave you with is the new camera bag updates from Think Tank. And we're going to talk, I think, a little bit more about this next week. I have a feeling. Over on the Think Tank Photo website, you have the new Airport Roller Derby. They also have My Second Brain briefcases. So they're taking the concept of the My Second Brain small, thin, Apple-based laptop bag, and they've extended it over to a briefcase. If you want to see them, then go to the website. The Airport Roller is here, right? I'm a big fan of their Airport Rollers, and I think that the Airport Roller Derby is going to be pretty good because it's a much bigger bag on 4 wheels. So takes the stress out of kind of dragging it out. We'll talk a little bit more about it next week. The other thing that they have is this My Second Brain. So this is what it looks like now. It's a briefcase bag. Something tells me you guys might even win one of these next week. So make sure that you take a look at thinktankphoto.com for all of the new releases for that. Make sure you take a look at the Adobe website. Make sure you take a look at the Fujifilm website. And make sure you stop back here at Photography Tips and Tricks next week. My name is RC. I'll see you guys soon.